Welcome to another episode of The Warrior Mind. In today's episode, we're going into blaming other things or other people. I wanted to start off this episode by diving into the art of war. Previously, we dived into Chapter 1, and as I was reading Chapter 2 today, the first thing that caught my mind was Sentence 7, specifically in terms of trading. Sentence 7 says, "It is only one who is thoroughly acquainted with the evils of war that can thoroughly understand the profitable way of carrying it on." When it talks about the only one, it's talking about a person. And that person who is acquainted with the evils of war, thoroughly acquainted, understanding the evils, yet finding the profitable way of carrying it on regardless. Understanding that in real war, there's the risk of losing your soldiers, there's the risk of losing your land, there's a risk of losing the war. But there's this profitable way of still carrying it on, finding the success within the failures that are looming, that can potentially happen. And when I was thinking of trading, you have to acknowledge the evils of trading, thoroughly acknowledge them. The overtrading aspect. The misconception that it's impossible to succeed in trading. You have to thoroughly understand that each of these exists, yet understand that there's a profitable way of carrying it on regardless. There's all these different strategies, and there's a profitable way of carrying it on. You only have to learn that one strategy, knowing that there's the potential that you can maybe learn something else from a different strategy. But you stick to one because you know that there's a profitable way of carrying it on. There's a profitable way of carrying it on through the losses, through the blown accounts. Those are the evils that you could potentially lose. And diving into today's episode, we're going to start with responsibility, specifically handing it over. When you hand over your responsibility, say you take a loss in the market, right? And that loss was due to the fact that you entered early. But instead of looking and taking responsibility of this loss and looking into what actually happened, you go look at Forex Factory first. And you see that CPI news event on Friday, 2 days from where you took that trade. And you're like, yeah, this week, it was because of the news event. There's this consolidation, and it's because of the news event. My loss was because of the news event. And you hand over your responsibility to that news event, and you are no longer in control because you tossed the responsibility aside and you forgot about the trade that you just took because you blamed that news event. You never took the time to dive into your charts and actually see that you entered too early. You entered too early. You disrespected your model, your system that said that you must enter here after seeing this specific disrespected confluence. And you hand over your control. The next thing should say driver's seat, but I confused it with the title of the book that I learned it from, which was The Millionaire Fastlane. Specifically, are you in the driver's seat or the passenger seat? Are you driving the car, or are you the passenger allowing the driver to take you to his path? Right? Is it your path or the path of the driver? In the market, your path is understanding that the market moves in a specific direction and it respects these specific confluences. Getting in the passenger seat and allowing the market to drive is like taking a trade without any actual reasoning and allowing the market to drive price to wherever it was going to go anyways. You are not in control, and that's no different from gambling. You being in the driver's seat is actually adding reasoning to your trading. Waiting for that market to trade into the weekly inefficiency, close below, disrespect some bullish confluences, and you being able to get into that sell with the reasoning that it's going to continue lower. That fundamental news also supporting your bias. That's being in the driver's seat. Being in the passenger seat is allowing the market to take you wherever it's going to go, not understanding why, and not being able to take advantage of it when you see a specific movement that it's headed towards. The next thing is pre-existing bias, and this all ties together. Pre-existing bias of success or failure, specifically with the mindsets of I can succeed or it's not possible to make money trading. And repeated wins or losses support either one of these mindsets. If you have the mindset that you can succeed, then your repeated wins will support the idea that you can actually succeed. It'll support the idea that your model is profitable and you can use it in the long run. However, with the idea that it's impossible to make money trading, repeated losses will instantly support the idea, also proving it true, because what you'll do is you'll either start to blame the model and your losses will actually support the idea that the model's trash, and you'll begin to look for another one. And then your losses with that model will begin to prove that it's the model's fault again, and you'll begin to jump in a cycle and cycle and cycle, going absolutely nowhere, and you'll never find profitability that way, especially when you're not aware of the pre-existing biases that may exist in your mind. The next thing is finding fault in things. Those losses and wins have no direct correlation to your model or your mindset unless you begin to blame them and find that fault in it. Like, was it you or was it your model? Was there something you could have done differently? These are questions that you begin to ask yourself. And you begin to find fault in things that might have never been there. Your losses do have no direct correlation to your model, but when you begin to take losses and start questioning your model, those losses will support the idea that perhaps you need to learn another model. And you'll begin to stop seeing the actual confluences of the model, and you'll begin to look rather at data. Did the model win or lose? Maybe your accuracy was 40%. Instead of adapting and trying to take full advantage of the market in the different variations that it gives you, you begin to blame your model and spend your time elsewhere, learning another model. Do you see where this goes wrong? The next thing that I wrote here was an empty canvas versus a painted canvas that needs time to dry. Sometimes you're an empty canvas, right? You're just a new trader. You're just exposed to this new market and you begin to learn. And those losses, they can actually support the idea that maybe you actually need to learn something and you can't just find profitability in the market by just buying or selling and getting lucky. That's a beneficial way of allowing the losses to support your idea to actually go learn something, to study maybe fundamentals or price action. However, the experienced trader, maybe somebody that's already watched 2022 and 2023 mentorship, right? All they need is that experience to tie everything together. The experience to be able to adapt in different variations of the market. All they needed was time to dry, yet they find fault in those things. They begin to question whether they should have learned support and resistance instead. And over time, those losses, they begin to tie it with the idea that maybe ICT isn't what they thought it was. They begin to tie those losses with their strategy. And then maybe they jump to SNR for a week. And during that week, they're the most profitable that they've ever been in their life. They will instantly disregard anything that they've previously learned and start learning a new strategy. And the market will always be different. And sometimes you'll win without actually knowing anything. In these cases, you begin to find fault in things that never existed. You begin to blame this model that all you needed was experience. And it's like painting over a portrait that already existed. The portrait was of a beach, right? The Bahamas. A nice little volleyball flying through the air. The waves of the beach. And then you begin to paint a picture of the city on top of it. All that's going to happen is a mess on that canvas. You're going to create a mess and completely destroy anything that would have been there. So don't find fault in things that don't need to be found fault in. Sometimes there isn't fault and all you need is experience. Sometimes all you need is some patience. And this ties everything together. Exposing yourself to new ideas. That pre-existing bias that maybe your strategy wasn't as good as the other one out there. Maybe the one that you chose versus the other one that you could have potentially chose isn't as good. And these new ideas that you may have been exposing yourself to, like support and resistance when you're studying ICT, right? And you begin to trade ICT, right? You're finally getting into the markets, and you begin to take losses. Maybe because you didn't learn enough, or maybe it's because your strategy sucks. That's exactly what you begin to tell yourself. And that pre-existing bias, in addition to exposing yourself to the new ideas out there, that maybe there's this super cool support and resistance strategy with a 93% win rate on YouTube. That shiny object will instantly catch your attention. And these repeated events, that first loss, tapping over the next domino of your strategy. And the next loss after it will tap over the next domino. And you'll begin to doubt what you know. And you'll disregard any information that you previously learned about ICT. That's when you jump ship and you'll drown. You're not going to jump on another ship, because then you'll begin to jump that ship again. And it's just a cycle of learning nothing. A cycle of actually gaining no experience with a specific model and causing yourself ultimate ruin in trading. So I encourage you guys to dive into this book, The Art of War, and correlate these things with trading. Let's read this next sentence. The skillful soldier does not raise a second Levi. Neither are his supply wagons loaded more than twice. Look at that. That's another thing that you can correlate with trading. I'm not sure what a Levi is. A second Levi. Let's search this up together. Define Levi. Enlist someone. Okay. An act of enlisting troops. This is like raising another troop. Neither his supply wagons loaded more than twice. What I thought of is that a skillful soldier doesn't need to raise another soldier to help him on the field. A skillful soldier will do the work that needs to be done on his end. And he won't load more than twice. You're not going to go in with more than the leverage that you initially need to. You're not going to double the lot size. You don't need to add another model to your strategy. If you're skillful with the model that you've learned, right? That silver bullet model. If you're skillful with the silver bullet model, you won't need to raise another model. You won't need to learn the quarterly theory. You won't need to learn my Asia session breaker model. You can find more and accomplish more than you ever needed with the model that you've already had. So you don't need to load your supply with more than you need to. You don't need to carry more than you can. That's going to be all for episode 2 of The Warrior Mind. I hope you learned something about blame. Don't hand over responsibility and relinquish your control over something that may have benefited you.